The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not out in the United States until this weekend, and while some US critics have seen it, I do not live in the greater Los Angeles area, and thus I have not. So you'll have to wait a little while for my review. Granted, I thought the first one was awful, and a lot of critics that I trust are telling me that this one is just as bad, if not worse, but we'll see. And I'm trying not to read serious spoilers, which is tough because the movie has been out elsewhere in the world for like a week or so now. Not that I'm going to lose my mind about a spoiler, I'd just rather not. What makes me less worried is that I've got a pretty good feeling that the biggest thing that could possibly be spoiled, and if we're being honest, I feel about 99% certain it has been spoiled for me via Twitter by now, but I'm still waiting to confirm with the actual movie, is something I've just been assuming was going to happen all along. A sense that's only gotten stronger after viewing the film's 753.6 thousand different trailers. Jeez, it's like the continued financial viability of an entire movie studio is riding on this thing, and seeing stuff like this.
You wanted to be the hero. Now you gotta pay the price.
Every decision you make affects the people we love.
Yeah. So, Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy is probably gonna die, right? That's what I'm getting from those ads. If you've seen the movie already and thus know for sure one way or the other, please be considerate about spoilers in the comments for the benefit of others, but that's what I'm guessing will be the big denouement of the movie. Gwen will die, giving Spider-Man a revenge motivation to carry into Amazing Spider-Man 3, where he will presumably be angry and bitter enough to slip on that uber-merchandisable black costume, thus setting the stage for Sony's already announced Venom movie, and likely being just enough of a threat for the Green Goblin to start putting together a team of henchmen to set the stage for the also already announced Sinister Six movie. If so, I imagine a lot of people will be legitimately shocked, even if they know that being Spider-Man's girlfriend who gets murdered is the only thing Gwen Stacy is famous for, since killing the main love interest doesn't usually happen in superhero movies. In fact, I'd wager that it'll seem exciting and unexpected to enough people so as to elevate the quality of the movie in their eyes, whatever that actually turns out to be. After all, I've often agreed that I prefer a flawed movie that takes chances to an overall better executed film that plays it safe. Except I'm not 100% sure that killing off Gwen Stacy really qualifies as that in and of itself. Oh, if they do it and they just nail it and it plays out as a really awesome, effective, powerful, resonant moment in and of itself, then yeah, that's one thing. But just on its own, conceptually, I can't imagine it registering as much of a visceral shock as, say, killing Rachel Dawes in The Dark Knight. Mostly because, well, why the hell else would you put Gwen Stacy in a movie? Death is, at this point, the entire morbid purpose of her existence. A one-time use stakes-raising human drama generator for each new iteration of Spider-Man. In case of sequel, break Gwen. Okay, look, Gwen Stacy is at this point kind of a problem that haunts the entire Spider-Man franchise. Not because she died, but because she is paradoxically a character who was deeply and long-term ingrained in the history and development of the Spider-Man mythos, and yet the only interesting thing she did while she was there was die, at the hands of the Green Goblin in Amazing Spider-Man issue 121, June of 1973. Here's the thing. For the most part, in the Gold and Silver Age of comics, unless they were also heroes themselves, superhero wives and girlfriends were almost never interesting or important. The books were being written for a target audience of mostly young boys, who it was assumed had zero interest in romance, but the adult male heroes sort of had to have female companions or else people would talk. So most love interests were basically one-note characters occupying the background, or if they were lucky, got featured roles as damsels in distress. And Gwen Stacy was no exception. There's a temptation to go back and imagine that her death makes the rest of her time in the Spider-Man books more significant, but since they didn't plan for her to end up that way at the beginning, it doesn't really work. There's no dramatic foreshadowing. She's not a bad character, there's just not much to her. She's pretty, she's nice, she puts up with Peter's BS, she's a reason for Spidey to just not quit on life altogether, and that's pretty much it. Just like there wasn't much to the previous Spider-Man girlfriends like Betty Brant or Liz Allen. Actually, Liz Allen was slightly more interesting because of the complications arising from her stepbrother being the Molten Man. Call it the Gwen Stacy paradox, a character you become interested in because of one specific plot development, but who is problematically still not actually interesting in retrospect. See also, it turns out Jar Jar Binks cast the deciding vote to turn the Republic into the Empire. Does that make him more interesting in The Phantom Menace? No, it does not. So while Gwen's famous death couldn't make her interesting, it did make her significant. In many ways, ASM 121 and 122 were basically a major in-continuity reboot of Spider-Man's entire status quo. Love interest dead, long-term arch-nemesis also dead, relationship to Harry Osborn irrevocably changed. Remember, from the 60s until about the early 80s, Marvel Universe actually did sort of move forward in time. Between the respective deaths of Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker had gone through high school and was well into his college years. And in many ways, the changes brought around by issue 121 helped sever this new adult Spider-Man from the kid Spider-Man he'd started out as. Hell, it's practically a second origin story. Remember, Spider-Man's heroic motivation had always been guilt, which is another thing that first reboot got wrong. Not revenge, not self-discovery, not a vision quest, guilt. But now instead of a child's guilt over failing to save a father figure, he has a grown-up's guilt over failing to save the woman he loves. And they ran with it. The Spider-Man of the 70s and 80s was a markedly different character than the guy we first met in 1962, with the ghost of Gwen Stacy hovering over those proceedings just as Uncle Ben's had back at the beginning. And keep in mind, this happened in 1973, so if you're a Spider-Man fan under the age of 40 40, basically, Gwen Stacy has been dead for as long as you've been reading Spider-Man comics. So as far as you were concerned, she might have been no different from Uncle Ben or Thomas and Martha Wayne or other origin story dead loved ones. Broadly drawn paragons of righteousness for the hero to live up to. Except with Gwen, you pretty quickly found out that she did have an actual history of her own, and you want to revisit it and make her retroactively as meaningful in life as she was in death. Sometimes that works, sometimes it does not. The first Amazing Spider-Man movie tried to solve that problem by making her a scientist and having her do a lot of the super mad science stuff Spider-Man would usually do, and it still didn't make her more interesting. They got lucky that these two actors are apparently dating in real life, because the chemistry they have did not come from that script. So yeah, if I come out of Amazing Spider-Man 2 saying, what a surprise, which is possible, I doubt this will be why. And I really hope that the filmmakers aren't angling on this possible shocker ending being the backbone of the movie, or even the whole franchise going forward, because killing this character in a movie in 2014 is not going to be the barn burner event that killing her in a comic was in 1973, and Sony's ambitious vision of the Spider-Man franchise has enough problems as it is without getting bogged down once again in the Gwen Stacy paradox. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.